You know, I'm sick of following my dreams, man. I'm just gonna ask 'em where they're going and hook up with 'em later. Mitch Hedberg. The Daily Grind, Chapter 140. The sixth floor of the hospital was more of a maze than James would have expected, though he'd be willing to bet that, like every building, if you spent every day walking around here for work or just to visit someone, it would start to feel more comfortable and less arcane in its layout. He didn't do that, though, so he was at risk of getting lost by going to the bathrooms. Though he'd also teleported in here, so he probably shouldn't complain that much if it took him an extra 5 minutes to find the office of the doctor he was meeting with. It was a pleasant part of the hospital. Despite the dark clouds and sloppy rain outside, this part of the building was warmly lit and carpeted. Used for administration offices and mental health services, it didn't need cold tile floors for the wheeled beds to traverse, or glaringly bright lights so the practitioners could see their patients as cleanly as possible. It was trying to put people at ease, which was helpful because James was not here for a pleasant reason. Your friend will live, Dr. Nikita told James. By association and the magic of smartphones, he was also telling a dozen people waiting back at the lair, who never would have been allowed to crowd into the hospital, what with the whole pandemic thing going on. None of his injuries were critical or life-threatening beyond the bleeding. Some internal damage, nothing that will not heal with time, though one kidney was damaged and may need to be removed. I do not suppose you have the means to procure us a supply of perfect human kidneys? The doctor's question came with a raised eyebrow, which James did not see. He was too busy closing his own eyes and breathing out a steady stream of stress. The question, coming from most people, would be a joke. But here was one of the Order's more valuable contacts with the normal world. Someone integrated into the bureaucracy of local medical care, in a position to maybe make a few changes, and also aware of the capabilities of the organization that James represented. We probably could. James thought about it as he let the anxiety of Reed's injuries leave his chest. We don't have access to the stasis effect we use to preserve the heart anymore, but we may be able to find a replacement. I think the biggest obstacle would be supply and relative impact. We can only make so many. Though kidneys also keep longer, don't they, like compared to hearts? Quite a bit so, though not forever, sadly. The doctor shook his head. We can maybe arrange something. I'll get back to you. Also, James offered a weak smile. Thank you for taking care of him. We owe you. It would have happened even if you were not who you are, Nikita replied. Child, do not think I am a doctor for my own amusement. Your friend would be taken care of regardless. You owe nothing. He paused. Well, the payments office will disagree, but you owe me nothing. James almost laughed, but for some reason the last year or 10 of his life had sucked all the fun out of the cruelties of the healthcare industry. Well, regardless, James said, thank you. Perhaps I am owing you some more thanks first, the director of surgery idly mused. I am hearing from my people that emergency patients are arriving as if they were injured only moments before, and hospital security has been working overtime to delete footage of strange snake creatures. Strange times we live in. Oh, right. James tapped his forehead as he remembered. One of those strange snake creatures wanted me to ask you about a job. They can freeze people in place, might be useful during surgery. You know, it is a crime to surprise an old man so much that you give him a heart attack. You've got spares, James shot back. Insolence, the doctor laughed, a warm sound in the cold hallway. Well, you aren't quite wrong. Now, duty calls for me. Was there anything else you wish to say before I step back into the waking world? We're expanding our crisis response team, James said. I'm going to hire away all the EMTs and undercut the company that runs the ambulances in this county as a test run. Can you have whoever's in charge of that for this hospital call me and set something up? We can arrange to have permanent arrival platforms for our teleporters here. Honestly? The doctor questioned. Yes. The older man closed his eyes, and for a second James couldn't tell if he looked 20 years younger or 100 years more tired. He opened them again. I will pass on your message, thank you, he said, a little stiffly. I must go now. Good luck to you. You too, sir, James nodded respectfully. All right. James was once again pacing back and forth in the briefing space the Order maintained in the back warehouse of their lair. This time, though, his audience wasn't 20 new hires, but the collective roster of the research division. Let's get one thing out of the way early here. No one is getting punished for this, okay? We're taking a page out of the Railroad Handbook. I have a question. One of the younger members of the audience's hands shot up. One of the high schoolers, James thought, an intern who had been present for the test run, but not responsible for any part of it. James answered without waiting for the question to be asked. Railroads have a vested interest in fixing problems, so when something goes wrong, they have a policy of not punishing anyone, so that whoever makes a mistake is encouraged to come forward and explain what happened, so the mistake doesn't happen again. No, I mean, I didn't make a mistake. Can I go? The student asked. No, James answered, because I still need to know what happened, and I want everyone who was there to be here for this. So, what happened? He asked, looking around at the faces of the people before him. Silence greeted him. Everyone, from the interns who were barely more than kids themselves, to the two older gentlemen who'd only recently joined research as their upended lives stabilized after being rescued from the office, the handful of Camercondas, to Momo with her own new apprentice, to the hazy connection that was the Infomorph planner, all of them met his question with the same shame-faced expression and quiet. James sighed. All right, let's try this. Nikhail, you're the closest thing to second command. What? I am? Nikhail's voice slipped into a higher pitch before he cleared his throat. I am. Okay, I guess. No one contradicted James. So, give me a timeline of what happened that night, he stated at the lanky kid. And remember, no matter what, there is no punishment here. No one is dead. Nothing cannot be fixed. Just tell me what happened as best you remember. Okay, Nikhail started, and took some time to think. Well, a lot of stuff happened, I guess, but what you're really asking is about the totem tests. We were using the orange totems that got Brack, trying to figure out their limits, just turning them on and turning them off, and I guess that was about 10 hours of work. That's a long time. What were you doing? James prompted. Exploring the limits, taking readings, making notes, Nikhail answered. A lot of the early tests really were just turning them on and off to make sure they worked. We were using drones, though, and oh, yeah, I guess we took an hour to actually get the drones working, and then we went really slowly once we started going into the spaces in person. Most of the time was spent taking samples or going over footage of the totems activating. Samples, okay, what of? The material of the structure. Concrete, mostly. We also took a long break before we started planning the first experiment. James held up a hand to stop him. Are you using experiment and tests separately? Yes, the tests were activations with no modifications. The first experiment was our attempt to modify the totem. Okay, can you or anyone here explain your methodology? James asked, keeping a neutral voice. He wasn't pacing anymore, though he was wishing that he'd turned the heat up back here. The warehouse was cold today. A thought occurred that he should check the walls for holes, just in case, given what had happened. It was Momo who answered. We compared the design of the totems that we had access to, and also compared them to the red totems that we know worked. I did some educated guessing, Anesh explained it with math. Basically, we worked out a formula that would only work if the totem would work, so to test it, we made a small modification and turned it on. And that led to... It didn't work, Momo undersold the event. It blew a hole in reality, Nikhail corrected. And the ceiling. It was an error, Taste of Air added. Reed spoke. The change was to the incorrect zone. What was supposed to happen, Nikhail said, was that it would, we think, have grabbed a snapshot of a slightly larger zone and then copied that. But it didn't do that, so either Reed was right and we just put the change in the wrong place, or our math was wrong, which seems a lot more likely. But then Anesh did most of the math, and I'm not going to pretend to understand it. I feel that way a lot, James answered. Momo, you disdain the math side of things. Your thoughts? The math is how Anesh expresses his own instincts, Momo told him. He's usually right, sometimes. I don't think he was wrong here. So what happened? James asked again. It was one of the older men who spoke up next. Davis, James was pretty sure his name was. He'd been a call center manager before all of this, and while he wanted to be useful, his main calling and research was a lifetime of tech support experience and being very meticulous. Not being innovative or intuitive, just being steady and organized. I think our method was wrong. He held his hand up, and a few heads turned to look at him. Yeah, may I? Davis, right? Go right ahead, please. James spread his arms. The method, how do you mean? Well, I took the time to double-check the formula Mr. Patel made against the totem itself. From the footage, not what's left of it. It should have worked. Mr. Reed's intuition at the end, I don't think is the only solution. He cleared his throat, withering a bit as Momo gave him a raised eyebrow. It's how we made the change that mattered, not the end state, he said. The formula is wrong because the formula is only looking at the end product. There's got to be more to a totem. You mean how it was done matters? James asked. It never mattered for the Reds, Momo rebutted. Though, she paused before shrugging. I mean, I guess I never really tested it, but I would have noticed. Yes, David agreed, nodding quickly. You build them all at once, though. I suppose the best way to say it is they're yours? This one, though, was already made, and we tampered with it. So you think if we rebuilt the totem from scratch exactly the same, it would work as expected? I don't know, Davis said bluntly, but we should try. Methodically and systematically, because if I'm right, it'll save us years of trial and error. And if I'm wrong, then another building explodes, Momo yelled at him. Oh, don't worry, James interrupted her, holding out a hand. You are never doing one of these tests inside again. Also chill, he's got a good point. Momo crossed her arms and grumbled something about controlled demolition, but she did obviously let some of her anger go. She wasn't angry at Davis, after all. Not really, and everybody knew it. Alright, does anyone else think they have an idea as to what the problem is? Any alternate viewpoints? Am I allowed to? The intern raised their hand again. Literally why you are here, yes, James pointed at them. Go ahead. Well, I don't know about most of the magic stuff, the kid said, looking sheepish. What if it was the drone? James blinked and glanced at Nikhil, who made a similar confused face. The drone? He asked. Well, yeah. The student looked like they were falling apart under the scrutiny of actually being asked the question. There was a weird feeling near the totem for the first few tests, like at first. But once we knew it was safe, we started turning it on without the drone, and then the feeling went away. What if it thought the drone was part of the totem? Nikhil tapped the desk he was sitting at before looking around at the rest of research. Anyone else feel anything weird for the first few tests? He asked. Almost everyone raised their hand or said something. Like your stomach dropping, right? But that went away after a few of them. I thought we just got used to it. If it was the drone, Momo's face was ashen. We just stapled a whole chunk of white noise to the totem's process. No wonder it blew up. Holy shit, it's a miracle it didn't blow up before. The dungeon totems must be impossibly stable to survive that, Nikhil started musing. There must be some kind of adaptation code in their structure. We need to put the orbs in by hand, or by catapult, Momo perked up. Yes. Okay, next time James cut him off, stepping into the discussion with a very sharp, singular question. Yeah, next time, he said. Which makes me wonder, why did you do this experiment at all this time? His words quieted the room. A minute later, Nikhil started to answer slowly, saying, Because we needed to... No, James stopped him. He kept a kind tone to his words and a peaceful look in his eyes, but he didn't allow for argument here. I mean, if this is something that one brainstorming session has caught not one, but two potentially lethal errors in, why didn't those get caught? Why, I am asking, are you all in such a rush? The assembled group looked at each other, at the ceiling, at the floor, anywhere but at James. If it had been quiet before, now everyone was hesitant to even breathe. Even the older people were a little sheepish. It was Momo who broke the silence, her chair scraping on the concrete floor as she pushed it back and stood up. She wasn't especially imposing as a figure, but every eye was on her as she leaned forward, palms planted on the table to address James. "Because you need us to," she said. "What?" "You need us to rush. You need more leverage, more options, more progress. If your stupid-ass bonkers plan to improve the world is ever going to work, you can't afford to have us playing safe." "No," James rebutted. "No, you are absolutely wrong," he told her, voice part sad and part just tired. "Momo, all of you, if you take away one thing from this whole mess, I want it to be this. That sappy paragraph I wrote in the operations manual about how you aren't expendable, yeah, that applies to you too." He sighed. "Yes, there's some big, stupid, splashy ideas floating around. Yes, being able to speed grow a city would be quite useful. But for fuck's sake, if you kill yourselves getting there, it will never have been worth it." "Sometimes important things take sacrifices," Momo glared at him. "Yeah, let me know when you find one of those things," James snapped back, finger joints popping as he slammed a fist into the table he was arguing with Momo over. "I thought we did," she trailed off. "I thought that's what we were." James noticed a few too many agreeing nods at that. He suppressed the urge to sigh again, or maybe to start throwing things at them. "Look," he said softly, and every ear in the room turned onto him. "The problems we hope to kill are problems that have been designed to be stable. We aren't in a hurry. Someday I might call on you to pull off something that will require an irresponsible amount of both caffeine and risk, but until then it is okay to slow down. Take it step by step, okay? No more accidentally making gods, no more giving yourself totem-based brain damage, no more blowing up my car. There's a time for that, and it's not now." "Oh shit, you're Nikhil coughed out an interruption to his own words. "I don't want to talk about it," James said in the same steady voice. "But I want you all to understand me, okay? If being safe takes an extra month, an extra year, it doesn't matter. Got it?" Muttered assent and nods returned to him. "Good," James said, really feeling his blood. "Now, like I said at the start, no punishments for this, but I am going to encourage everyone here to sign up for a training rotation with the response division." He noticed a few winces. "It'll be good experience for you." The words he didn't say were, "And maybe this will keep you out of trouble for a little bit." He didn't need to say that part out loud. "We're in trouble." Karen caught James just as the elevator doors opened into their skyscraper office floor. He briefly considered hitting the close doors button, going home, and going to bed. His eyes flicked to the button on the elevator's panel before James remembered that he didn't actually have a ride home until later. He revised his plan to simply using the telepad tucked in his coat pocket. Then he sighed as he realized he needed to take time to write the address down, and in that time Karen would certainly interrupt him. "What kind of trouble? 1 to 10 it for me, 10 being death of all life on Earth," James asked, stepping off the elevator and nodding politely to their guard Fern. "Death of 2!" Karen stared at him incredulously. "We're running out of money, that's all." "Sorry, it's been a long day." James tried to give her an apologetic smile. "It's 11 a.m. "Yeah." "Well, be that as it may, our issues may not be fully apocalyptic, but they are real." Karen shook her head, mostly ignoring James's comment. "Currently our income sources are sporadic and unreliable, and our expenses are growing massively as we bring on more people." "Okay, so we need to expand our income. How'd the thing with the silver work out?" James asked. "I have a call scheduled for later today to finalize the exchange, which, if Officium Mundi operations remain ongoing, should net us $20,000 to $30,000 a week, with the option to scale up as we more fully exploit the resources available to us. James froze mid-step, halfway to the vending machine that they'd relocated to this part of the office. Looking down at the crumpled $1 bill he was going to use to buy a random drink for himself, he glanced back at Karen, slipped his money back into his wallet, and said, "Can I borrow $1?" "Next week," she said. "And while I understand why you react so strongly to that, it's important that you know that this is not enough to keep us solvent, not the way the Order spends money." "Fuck, really?" James puffed out a breath, eyes wide. "What are we spending so much on? I know what our equipment budget is. It's not that bad." "Again, it's mostly people. You are paying full-time salaries to 57 individuals. 69 if you count people like yourself and Anesh, which you should." "Nice." She very deliberately ignored that comment, too. "And you pay generously. Not extravagantly, mind you, but well above what most people could expect anywhere else in the area. Our payroll costs are currently at over $200,000 a month, and on top of that we pay rent to use this." Karen looked around. "Well, not this place, but you are aware of what I mean." "The lair, yeah. We actually do pay rent on this office. It's just way less because we got a good deal due to the pandemic issues and leasing contracts. And JP, I think. 200 grand? Seriously?" James thought for a second, and then the math caught up with him. It was surprisingly easy to hold numbers in his head now, and it clicked suddenly which one was off. "Wait, what about the Camercondas?" "They don't collect pay directly, but there is a trust set up in their name that money is funneled into," Karen said, and James eased a sigh of relief. "I don't want to question your methods, because clearly they are working, and also because I'm one of the people you pay so well, but you might want to cut back on payroll until we can balance the books." "First off, no. Second off, where's the money been coming from for the last 6 months, then?" James furrowed his brow in confusion. "We've opened 2 briefcases. Anesh has a real government job now, but that's not close to enough. Is it JP's investments? I don't believe he makes us this much money. Or maybe I do, and I just think capitalism is gross." "JP's portfolio isn't where most of our funding came from. It's what's left over after his consulting work with the FBI. Karen stepped past James and fed a pair of coins into the vending machine, pushing a seemingly random button and waiting for her drink to dispense. "He extorted them for quite a lot, but we are running out, hence the suggestion for pay cuts." "Worrying, but still, no. We'll find ways to bring in cash, but I won't cut pay unless it's the last resort." "Why not?" Karen asked, more curious at his logic than being upset at being told no. "People want to give their best," James explained. "People also don't want to be cheated. You try to take someone who's good at what they do and get a good deal out of them, and you find that in a few months they just aren't so good. If they stick around for more than a few years, then they've probably given up. That's not how you get the best out of someone. You get that by handing them what they need and cutting the leash. And yeah, most people here would understand pay cuts, but it's more than that. It's cultural conditioning. I want everyone in the Order to get used to the idea of a world where they don't have to be afraid of where they'll sleep or where they'll eat. I want that to be normal for us, so that when we slam a city-state down and start inviting people to come join us, we have a foundation to that society. It has to start small, or no one will ever believe that it'll work big." Karen eyed him over the glass jar the vending machine had given her. With a quick twist, she popped the lid off and took a sip, still considering James. "I worry that sometimes I may underestimate you," Karen said to him. "I've been saying that to people all week," James admitted. "Is that any good?" he asked, pointing at her drink. "No," Karen replied, "but it's very good for you." "Okay, sure. So, options for money. We could start selling skill orbs?" "Absolutely not." Karen cut the idea down. "And while I have personal reasons for why I think that is a terrible idea, and in particular a terrible idea to spread knowledge of the dungeons, allow me to offer you a reason that you will find convincing." "Go right ahead," James invited as he started browsing the infinite menu of buttons on the vending machine himself. "The only people who could pay enough to make it worthwhile to us are the exact sort of people who do not need the ability to turn money into more advantages." James paused. Wow, that's surprisingly compelling, he admitted. Okay, software design. Use the Emerald chips to make some cool apps, profit off those. Already in progress, but they grow slowly. Karen didn't mention that she'd been the one to suggest that idea months ago. She was far too professional for that. More jobs for the government? James almost used his dollar of vending machine credit to buy a drink called Drink as he spoke, but moved on, letting his thoughts get back on track. Actually, wait, can we just ask the government for funding? The U.S. federal government, Karen asked. Yeah, couldn't hurt, right? You wish to ask the people you intend to make obsolete and undermine the global power structure of if they will pay you to do so. Well, it sounds stupid when you say it like that. Karen took another sip of her health drink. Yes, she said, it does. Okay, ow. I feel like you've been hanging out with us for too long. I liked it more when you weren't roasting me all the time. James clicked his tongue, giving up on finding anything on the buttons that resembled a clue as to what the can might hold, and just closed his eyes and jabbed one at random. Okay, well, what about... no, I don't know about the ethics of that one. He glanced at Karen, who raised an eyebrow at him. Well, what about selling insurance to businesses, backed up by response, like a home security system? Ah, but the service is already free, Karen told him, and protecting businesses is much different than protecting homes and people. Yeah, I know, which is why I don't know if it's ethical, James shrugged. Maybe if it... He was cut off mid-sentence by the ding of the elevator, and both he and Karen turned to see who had approached. The doors slid open, and Harvey took the 600-mile step from the lair into their off-site office. He wasn't really focused on anything, though he did have a still steaming cup of coffee in his hand, and he got a good ways past the sunlit desks and conference table before he saw James and Karen, and his walk turned to a slow stroll up to them. "We're in trouble," he said, his voice as deep as it ever was, with the frayed edge of exhaustion creeping in. "People keep saying that to me," James said. "I really wish they'd stop." "Are you sure you should be in charge?" Karen casually let the words slip out as she sipped her own beverage. Harvey ignored both of them and addressed James more directly. "People are starting to notice response," he said. "Good?" James thought about it and then nodded. "Good. That's the point. Proof of concept doesn't work if there's no proof of the concept." "Yeah, well, I get that," Harvey said. "But the local police department just put a thing on their Facebook page asking for information that could lead to arrests for dangerous vigilantes that have been operating in the area." "Okay, won't lie, that's worrying. How'd they hear about us?" James asked. "Well, that's not the first trace of us online," Harvey said. He set his coffee on a nearby desk so he could pull up a page on his tablet before handing it over to James. "Here's a post that showed up on a Reddit thread asking about paranormal experiences." James skimmed the main story and then glanced through the comments section underneath. "This looks like it's from someone who saw a camera condo while driving past. I won't lie, that's gonna happen. Not much we can do about it." "Yeah, that one isn't that bad. It's mostly just people demanding an AMA with the snake and then 15 comments of people typing magic snake in all caps. The problem is mostly the police Facebook. It's got a half dozen comments from people who we've either actually helped or might be aware of us." Again, won't lie, that's probably the best opening salvo we could have hoped for. James flipped through another screenshot Harvey had saved, a post that listed resources for mental health helplines and included their number among them. That one was actually a bit problematic because they didn't have the resources for that yet. It was nice to be noticed, though. The point of the response program was, after all, to be noticed. The end objective was a passive replacement of the system of policing that existed and in many ways had failed the people it was supposed to protect. James had known going in that the police probably wouldn't like that, but fuck them. They had their chance and they whiffed it. So he wasn't as concerned as Harvey seemed to be that the local PD was already starting to get uppity. That was the point. To be noticed. To be public. Besides, it wasn't like the police could actually get to them here. James hummed out loud as the thought occurred. "Would a warrant allow the police through Planner's smokescreen?" he asked. "Would that count? Let's not find out. Also, none of these posts have really gone viral. I don't think we're in huge trouble here. What's your worry?" he asked Harvey. The real worry. That we're moving too fast, Harvey said. We've got no full-time responders except for Simon, and only 3 people working dispatch. We're not stable. We're not ready for this kind of attention. We need to do more before we can handle the scrutiny that we're inviting. Also, this is local. Yeah, because we've been operating locally, James said with a little confusion. As a test. What I mean is, it doesn't have to be, Harvey said. We can back off on letting people around here know about response and instead focus somewhere else for a while. Choose a few small towns in the Midwest. Don't cut anyone off here, but pivot where we're advertising. If we keep things a bit spread out, it'll buy us time before we actually have to have a full-on confrontation and accounting for our operation. What, like just start policing Ohio? Can't do worse than Ohio's cops now, Harvey shrugged. And if we spread out, it's only good for us. We teleport everywhere anyway. Okay, James said. I hereby authorize that. Also, I'll see about getting you some new faces. We can hire new people. Karen, you seem mad. What's up? You already know we cannot hire new people, James. It was impressive that she managed to sound like she wasn't being condescending when she said that, while still making James feel appropriately chastised. We need our budget balanced first. I'll start a Patreon, James quipped. But then, more seriously, he added, But no, you're right. We need a real income stream to offset costs, and a big part of the problem is that the main buyers for a lot of our stuff are going to be people who we shouldn't ethically sell to. So, put the word out to the whole order. We need good ideas that will keep us solvent and also not make the world worse while we do it. And if you really need us to, we can devote more Delver hours to hauling out chunks of silver that you sell on the black market? No. Gray market? It's perfectly legal. I believe you, James chose. So, Karen, money. Harvey, Ohio. And let me know exactly what kind of people you need. I have to go talk to a few people now about a stupidly dangerous expedition in a few days, so if you'll excuse me... James slid back into the elevator, abandoning the 2 adults in the room to the work they had lined up. He'd only come up here in the first place to raid the vending machine. The revelation that the drinks from the vending machine could, under at least one condition, contain the most rare of purple orbs had been an important one, and the single vending machine that they'd hauled out of the dungeon and transplanted to this office seemed an easy way to continue testing that, exploring the seemingly endless menu of options that the things had on offer. Someone had suggested just cracking it open, but James put a stop to that idea pretty quickly. He wasn't the only one who had the feeling when he looked at the drink dispenser that the monolithic machine might somehow be very dangerous if provoked. After his personal encounter with one last week, he hadn't even really wanted to move this one again. It was best not to risk it. So far, they hadn't uncovered any more secret orb purchases, but James figured it was only a matter of time. Honestly, what had surprised him most about today hadn't been research punching a hole in the parking lot, or that more and more things were starting to spin out of control at once. No, it had just been that Karen was on board with everything. James had a mental image of the stoic woman as exactly that, a stoic member of the management caste of American society, someone who didn't exactly want the status quo, not really, but who benefited from it, whose job very much kept it propped up. And that person, that expectation, came through sometimes. She didn't trust people she didn't know. She didn't want to spread around knowledge of the Order. She certainly didn't want everyone having magic. But when James said, "We're going to replace the police," Karen said, "Good, someone needs to keep the peace properly." When James said, "We're hiring a bunch of high schoolers," Karen said, "Fine, make sure to get their parents' permission." When James said, "I want a moon base," Karen didn't tell him that was stupid or worthless or that it wasn't his place to make that call. She did tell him they couldn't afford it, though, which... fair. Disappointing, but fair. The point was, she kept surprising him, kept being a slightly better person than he expected when he wasn't looking. She was still grumpy most of the time, still standoffish and pragmatic to the point of being cold, but she never once acted like the Camercondas weren't people. She never told them they didn't have the right to make the world better. And she even started bringing her daughter to the lair on weekends. It was a change of sorts, but a welcome one, a positive shift towards something hopeful. And she wasn't the only person who'd gone through something like that. It felt, James thought, hopeful as he stepped off the elevator and went to plan something stupidly dangerous with some of the more reckless delvers in the order. What about her? Miles asked into his cell phone. He was sitting at a side table in an alarmingly open bar in the middle of Nowheresville, Texas, alternating between listening in on other patrons and watching the entrance to a coffee shop located across the dying strip mall parking lot. She looks like she's out of place here. What he didn't add was the phrase, like me, but he did think it. Yeah, JP's voice came back to him. Don't stare too hard. If she looks up, don't shy away from eye contact. You're talking to someone, right? Right, Miles answered, taking a deep breath and gnawing at his lip under his face mask. Nate had pointed out to them earlier that the pandemic made great cover for anyone learning tradecraft because masks could smooth over a lot of facial tells and mouth movements that would otherwise give you away. Of course, wearing a mask in a bar in the eastern edge of northern Texas was the opposite of inconspicuous, but it was all about trade-offs. He'd also have to take it off eventually to drink the beer he had sitting in front of him. Instead, he kept an eye on the woman who just walked into the bar. Their target. Their target, who was a spy. Probably. What in the fuck had happened in his life? Well, he'd snuck into a secret headquarters for a clandestine society of radical anarchist dungeon-crawling adventurers, for one thing. Everything else had kind of snowballed from there, and before you knew it, an ex-agent was teaching you how to lose a trail, and you were getting teleported across the country on stakeouts. Keep an eye on her, JP told him over the open line. Also, let's go over a lesson. How did you know she'd be here? A tip? He asked. He could almost feel JP cocking an eyebrow through the phone. Sorry, yeah, legwork. Nate talked to one of the bartenders, offered a reward for any unusual behavior. He contacted us when someone new rolled into town, started asking questions. So now I wait here for that person to come back. Can I ask something? There was no response, so Miles assumed the answer was yes. Yeah, why am I here and not you or Nate? Good question, JP said, like a bastard. So, now what? Miles blinked and remembered what Nate had drilled into him. Keep watching, don't get too close. I'm just supposed to figure out where she's staying, so don't risk contact. Drink some of my beer so it's not suspicious? Sit here and listen? Good call, kid. Nate's voice answered, though from a bit farther away and on speakerphone. Miles sat for a bit, sipping his drink and puzzling something out. He'd set his phone down, but he still had a Bluetooth earbud in. Holding the phone up was just a more obvious cover for speaking. It didn't take more than a few seconds for it to click in his head. He was here because the bartender knew Nate's face. If the person they were asking questions about, who was asking questions about strange things on their own, said anything, and the bartender glanced at Nate, that could give away the game. Right now, it was important that they identify who this woman worked for, and if they should pursue her as a lead. So Miles was here because Nate was a risk. A part of Miles's brain heard JP make some kind of sarcastic comment through the headset, but he found himself suddenly distracted. Something was wrong. Wrong in a different way than how some of the Order's magic looked. Wrong in a way past anything that was actually visible. There was just something off, something instinctually problematic. Miles told his teachers to shut up and started scanning across the parking lot through the bar's plate glass windows, hand unclenching from around his mug as he set his mask back in place. JP kept talking, but Nate silenced him, sensing the sudden solidity in Miles's voice. Parking lot. Too many cars for comfort, too much sun for December, even if it was properly cold. Cracked asphalt, brown weeds growing up through the hard ground with slashes of green every now and then. There was a grocery store that was doing a fair amount of business, a fabric outlet, 2 coffee shops, a sushi joint, and a mechanic, and then 6 boarded-up empty slots in the dying strip mall. But even still, there were people moving around. A family with 3 young kids, an old man getting some shopping done, a handful of people eating cake outside one of the cafes, a half-dozen cars with people still in them. Miles stopped, the tension in his gut unknotting a little bit as he noticed what he had noticed. Hey, he asked into the phone. Why am I out here? Training, Nate said, giving him an over-the-shoulder wave from the front seat of the van on the outskirts of the parking lot. Miles groaned. I thought we were doing something important. You told me... Hey, Nate cut him off. Getting you this kind of practice is important. None of James's bullshit skills are reliable, and so far, none of them have been about this kind of on-the-ground work. Before we start sending you out to actually gather intel, you need to be able to do the basics with your eyes closed. Good instincts, though. And this is important. You are on assignment. I'm just backup. Alright, I know. Miles didn't complain too much. So, walk me through it. How'd you notice? I just started looking. Something felt wrong, I guess. He thought about it before coming to a tentative conclusion. I could have noticed any time, I just wasn't looking until something was off. And the target started looking nervous too, so I guess I started looking. So, next time? Don't stop looking? You can't look all the time, kid, Nate told him. But you can do a hard look more often, on your own terms. Remember that. You said the target looks nervous? Kinda, Miles said quietly, pitching his voice quieter, but in a tone that wouldn't carry far, like he'd been taught. She keeps glancing at the door. She's looked at me a few times. He evaluated the measure of her gaze as she looked his way again. It's not that she's suspicious, unless she can read my lips through the mask. I think she's waiting for somebody. Alright, act like you hung up on me, set the phone down, tap the earpiece, and look contrite. Nate sounded weirdly proud of his word choice. Sit for a while longer, listen in if you can. I'll be on the line for backup if you need it. Miles sighed, glad that Nate couldn't see him rolling his eyes as he followed directions. And then it was a different part of training that he hated. Learning how to play the waiting game. Miles used the stuff that Nate had been drilling into him, making sure he could always see the woman that they were surveilling out of the corner of his eye as he focused on the bar's TV. Wrestling wasn't his thing, but it was something to do, and he couldn't really make small talk while he did this. The one thing he hadn't been made aware of, going in, was that spying on people was actually quite boring. And also, spying on people was often about managing how bored you were. 18 minutes later, he counted, someone else sat down at the target's table. Huh, he muttered. He was sitting by the door, but he hadn't seen this other woman come in. Was there a back entrance? He didn't want to jump to conclusions about this being the kind of arcane society they were hunting after, but that felt weird. So good to see you, the new arrival said, except Miles' ears tried to reject that. She had said something else. Hey there, how you been? And, well, hello again, old friend, and multiple sentences, all basically the same, all layered on top of each other. The target muttered something in reply, and it didn't sound happy at all. The new woman spoke again, and Miles tried to sift out the meaning from her words, but his head started to ache and his vision blurred. This was wrong. Something was going on, and it wasn't too much warm beer. Weird, he mumbled. The new woman's head snapped around to look at him, smiling eyes meeting his own. She had beautiful eyes, he thought. One of them was a bright red, the other green, the other set was blue, her left eye was scarred over, her left eye was a little off-center. Her right eye was closed. She winked at Miles. He recovered from the shock like a champion, shooting her a goofy grin and raising his glass in her direction. You ladies want some company? He asked, putting a small slur on the words. No, fuck off, the target barked at him, and he wilted under her stare as the newcomer laughed. Ah, Miles stood. Well, no worries. Sorry to bother you, miss, he said, wandering down the bar's back hall to the men's room, putting a tiny tilt on his walk. The instant the door closed, he hissed into the headset. Nate. What? Something's wrong. What's going on with the new contact? He demanded of his backup. Miles glanced around the dingy bathroom. It hadn't been cleaned since before the pandemic, and it didn't look like it had a lock for the door. Not that he thought that would matter. Something about that woman set his nerves on edge, like she could wipe him out of existence without trying. She looked like a mountain contained in human skin. What do you mean? Nate asked. Over the phone, the sound of a door slamming echoed, and Miles checked his wing mirror to see Nate stepping out of the van for a smoke. People you were talking to? She feels wrong, Miles said, confused. Like she's several people stacked on top of each other. And no, that can't be right. I've got to be missing something. Already the details were slipping out of his brain. Maybe he was just confused. The more he thought about how she looked, the more questions his brain fed to him about the nature of the woman talking to the target, until eventually it looped back around to him just kind of having an indistinct impression of a person. Nate, are you there? Leave. Now, Nate told him. Telepath out. His voice was strained. But what's... Stop talking, Nate said, the order so sharp and hard that Miles instantly remembered that the person who had trained him had been at one point in his life a soldier and then a spy, and that when he needed to, he could project a scary level of violence. Out, now, no questions. Miles obeyed without saying anything else, hanging up first to avoid causing problems with his connection, and then writing the rally point's address on his telepad and blinking away. They'd deal with the rental cars later, he supposed. He caught himself as his feet touched down on loose gravel, slipping a little bit. As Miles righted himself and brushed his hands off, Nate snapped into existence next to him. So now what? Miles asked him, rubbing his bare arms against the sudden cold of the empty Oregon field where they'd parked their cars and were using as a rally point. What was that? Now we wait here for a while, Nate told him, lit cigarette still held between his teeth. He looked somewhere between angry and resigned. What are we waiting for? Miles tried to calm down. If we're lucky, nothing, Nate said. Miles didn't feel very good all of a sudden. What if we're unlucky? He asked, his stomach doing somersaults in his gut. Is there a worst case scenario here? Worst case? The old gun follows us somehow, shows up, kills us both, traces us back to the lair where she kills everyone else, Nate said. The what? What? What the fuck? Calm down. Deep breaths, Nate told him, flipping open the trunk of his car and extracting a gun that looked like someone had turned a shark into a firearm. With a smooth motion, he slung the strap over his shoulder, loaded a magazine, checked the chamber, and got into a kneeling position. Almost as an afterthought, he took a drag on the cigarette. What is going on? Miles demanded, panic rising. That thing you saw? Nate told him. It's the same thing James ran into in the school last year. Probably. Or something like it. The thing they fought was... there's a lot of rumors and no hard intel. People think it's what happens to people like us after too long. Some people think it's a god. Nate briefly filled him in on the creature, relaying as much as he remembered off the top of his head, before ending with, either way, we don't have a way to kill it right now, but we do have a protocol for dealing with stuff like that, and it's ugly. What is it? Die quickly and far away from everyone else, Nate said grimly. Miles stiffened. Why was it talking to our target? Good question, Nate said. I don't know. You tell me. Even now it was still training. Miles glared at his teacher for a second, but then ran through his memory of the scene. The woman was hard to focus on, hard to remember, but her actions were still there. She didn't look like she thought anything was weird, but she also didn't look happy, so they're probably not working together. The target either couldn't see it or she was used to it, but she seemed high school angry, like she was being forced to do something. You overhear anything? Nate asked. Anything the old gun said that might explain why she was there? Nothing the informant said made it sound like this was normal. He continued his sweep of his vision over the empty field. Well, Miles thought. He thought because that's why they'd hired him, after all. To think, to find the weak spots and weird bits in the world. It was the reason JP had given him a job. Okay, so the old gun isn't local, then, he decided. And it needs people for something? It sounds like it doesn't care about killing anyone. Like it's not murderous, just that it doesn't value life? That's a general consensus, Nate nodded. The target didn't look surprised, Miles said, shoulders slumping. It's trying to get her to do something. Or giving orders. Checking in with one of its own agents, maybe? Maybe... There's too much we don't know. Nate glanced at him and raised an eyebrow in appreciation, gave a small nod, and checked his watch. You're right, he said. We'll wait here for another hour. After that, you've got an assignment. What? Miles tensed up. Doing what? Actually keeping tabs on the target, Nate grumbled. Don't look so glum. You get off easy. I'm the one who has to tell James about this. You're going to get to play with the program that hijacks traffic cams. James paused the YouTube video he was watching as his cohorts in madness arrived. He was watching a little thing about beetles, and while it wasn't exactly what he wanted to be doing, it was useful, because so far it had been worth 4 points toward his biology lesson. He was pretty sure he could push that thing over the edge tonight. Right now, though, they had a delve to plan. For the first time in too long, they were actually using the warehouse to plan dungeon activity. He'd set up 2 large boards next to the table they would be using, displaying a sketch of the route to the goal and then printouts of every relevant picture they'd managed to grab of the target zone. Their objective? The bathrooms. A spire of blue and white tile that pierced through the false ceiling and plumbed into the depths of the dungeon itself. Pun mildly intended. His crew? Well, they were filtering in now. Hey! James greeted Anesh as his boyfriend took the seat next to him, leaning over to give a quick kiss, and then, unsatisfied with that, a series of descending, smaller kisses down Anesh's neck that left his partner sputtering a laugh as he pushed James away. Hello to you too, Anesh said. I have a thing, courtesy of Sarah. He held up one of Clutter Ascent's bonding sticks. Connection open. Anesh Patel to James Lyle. 1 corridor established, 1 corridor empty. The 2 of them hissed lightly, along with a rapid flare of light that marked a small circle on the back of each of their right hands. This was the second one for both of them, Anesh sharing a connection with Alana and James with Sarah. But the mental nudge they got when they cracked the stick didn't mention those, so it must only count the ones between the same set of people. Each of them independently wondered what would happen if you stacked connections between 2 close friends. They also wondered at what personal moment would activate the currently empty link between them, turning it into the world's most powerful sharing tool. We'll fill that in later, James smirked at his boyfriend as he lightly elbowed his side, eliciting a riotous blush from him. Please, not in public, Simon said, pulling up a chair on the side of the table and dragging a second chair out with a hooked foot for the dog-shaped magnetic distortion that was his closest companion to hop up onto. You'll make Anesh implode. It'd make a mess. That's largely the idea. James kept the innuendo train going, shooting finger guns at Simon before backing off into more serious territory. How are you doing, by the way? Anything I can do to help? We're all right, Simon shrugged. I'm all right. I'm fine. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it was obviously not the whole truth. Simon noticed that James noticed, but he held strong under the disbelieving gaze that the paladin shot him. Seriously, I promise I'll let you know if I need anything. All right, James accepted that. He was still worried, or perhaps concerned. Ever since Simon's partner had lost his body last year and Simon had grabbed as much of his mind and personality as possible, he hadn't been the same. Obviously. But while he seemed to be adapting well to whatever his new existence was, it didn't mean James wasn't going to be ready to help if he could. Hey, nerds! The next person to approach was Alex, taking a break from assisting in the Lair's kitchen today for this, but still wearing a stained apron. Guess what I got? She grinned as she slid into the chair opposite Simon. In trouble with Nate for not cutting carrots right? That's weirdly specific, Anesh glanced at James. What did you do? Not cut the carrots right, apparently. Skill orbs for cooking don't actually help if your chef is super picky about... Alex cut him off. Yeah, that's great. I got my lesson leveled up. Oh, rad. James grinned as her enthusiasm bled into the small group. That'll probably be useful for this. What did you get from it? Yours was home ec, right? Alex nodded and motioned to the apron. Yeah, hence the... whatever. I got timing. It's kind of cool, because it's like very dramatic about how obvious it is when I need to use it. It's not just guessing what time it is or how long something's been in the oven, it's also how long things should be in the oven. Even if I maybe shouldn't know that, it's cool, even if it's not exactly like for a fight, you know? That's still rad, and every bit is valuable, James reminded her. Alright, well, Momo and Tyrone will be joining us on the expedition if it happens, but she's busy right now and he's at work, so we're the planning team. Let's get down to business. Alex and Simon opened their mouths at the same time, eyes glittering with the same smiling amusement. Down to business to defeat the... So anyway, James cut them off, our objective is this. He turned in his seat and slapped his hand under a printed image pinned to the board behind him. It was a low-resolution picture of as far down to the bottom of the bathroom spire that they could see. The single strange thing floating there on what looked like a platform of some kind. Alex raised her hand. So I got the invite here because I have 2 ranks in free climbing now, and that's cool, but no one actually told me what is going on? Okay, let me explain, James said. No, Anesh cut in. Don't explain. We'll be here all night. Sum up. Okay, let me sum up, James reiterated. We want to try to get to the bottom of the bathroom, or at least as far down as we can see right now. There's clearly something down there that isn't following normal rules for office loot drops. I'm beyond curious what it is. It's a Nokia phone, Simon dryly stated. We know what it is. Okay, I'm direly curious to see what it does, James told him. The dungeon doesn't put stuff in places like this for no reason. It never puts stuff in places like this. The fact that it's there, obvious, and has been there for months at this point, maybe years, that's suspicious. I'd like to learn what it's all about. So enter the bathroom, secure the entry platform, and begin making our way toward the target. Secure it, get out. That's our strategy. How far down is it? Simon asked. Anesh? James prompted. Anesh cleared his throat. Assuming no warped space, nothing wonky going on, rough estimate based on the size of the first platform is that it extends 600 feet to the lower one. That is a lethal fall, Simon commented. I don't think we can do this right now, I won't lie to you. I know I can't climb back up that far, no, James agreed with a nod. But I still seriously want that thing, if only to settle the ongoing bet I have with Daniel about what it does. He gestured to the image of the phone. We can also always telepad out back to the central tower. That way we aren't teleporting out of the office itself and giving ourselves migraines and possibly organ damage or whatever else it's doing to us. Well, we can put together a rough map of the inside of the spire, right? Alex asked. Why don't we just take a billion ropes and spikes in, set up a pulley at the top? Is there anything stopping us? We don't really know what lives in there, Anesh pointed out. And what James isn't saying is that we know that at least one thing lives in there. Check the silverfish entry in the manual if you want to see, he directed them. You, Alex and Simon said in unison. Yes, you, but they also aren't that dangerous if we have a decent ranged weapon, James added. And we have those. We have a lot of those. Is this... Sorry, these pictures are a little unclear. Simon traced a line on one of the images on the board. Is this water just hovering in the air? Yes. That's weird. Yes. Right. Sorry. Forgot where I was for a second. Simon leaned back. No, I don't think we can do this safely without a few blue abilities that make it possible. Even if we build a rope pulley, and we should, there's going to be something down there. What do you mean? Anesh asked, curious. James answered in Simon's place. He means there'll be a boss fight, right? A nod. Yeah, it's too obvious now that I think about it. It's a little like the towers. They get harder on the higher floors, and then the upper floors have green-style puppet life. And some kind of reward, too. This will probably be like that, just going the other direction. We just don't know what's down there. Oh, Drones. Alex snapped her fingers. Don't we have, like, 100 camera drones in the basement? Next time we go in, just get someone to puppet a bunch of those. Hell, we can even time how long it takes to get there, too, so we know how long we have. About 2/3 of the path there is this giant corridor. James tapped the map on the whiteboard. We've got bikes ready to go. If we want to set up the pulley ahead of time... Oh, no, wait, the dungeon reset thing. I know this is weird, but I do hate that the dungeon resets and rearranges itself now, Anesh told him. It's mildly convenient sometimes, but it's also a giant bloody pain for things like this. Alex rapped her knuckles on the table. Well, I want to see this place anyway. Can we go this week? If that's okay. I'll learn how to do the drone thing if no one else wants to. That could be handy. We don't really have a drone enthusiast anymore. James felt his energy die out, his eyes drifting shut. He shook his head a couple of times and snapped back to the conversation. Okay, anyone have anything else to suggest? He asked. No one did, though. Alright, we'll do more scouting. I want to tackle this within a month. Obviously, yes, doing it safely, but I mean... He looked at them and shrugged. The last thing we found at the end of a tower, Anesh said. Let us duplicate magic items. Maybe this thing makes us invincible, Alex suggested as they all stood up and made to leave. Simon glanced at her as the two of them headed for the door. Why invincible? He asked. It's a Nokia, she answered, simply, grinning. I worry that I'm wearing off on people, and it's kind of great, James muttered to Anesh. His boyfriend nodded glumly. You're assimilating them. Soon all will be pun. As it was meant to be. Hey, can I get a ride home with you? He asked. Oh, just teleport. Or hell, if you really want to drive, borrow my car, I'll teleport. I'm honestly not sure why I'd drive anymore at all. Anesh tossed James his keys. Go, relax. I'm mandating that you take the rest of the day off. Yes, sir, James saluted energetically, and then waited for Anesh to respond. After a slight, almost awkward pause, he leaned in and asked, You're not going to tell me not to call you that? Not if you're following orders, Anesh grinned at him wolfishly. Yes, you're not the only one who can turn the tables, he said. The two of them laughed, any sense of awkwardness between them gone at this point. Seriously, go, play some games, watch some YouTube or something. I'm going to hang out here for a while and do math homework, but I'll be home in a few hours. I thought you were done with homework. I was, and then classes started again. College keeps going, James, Anesh told him. Anesh, didn't you graduate? Yeah. And? And what? Anesh had already occupied a swath of the table with his own notebooks and a textbook that looked incredibly threatening. James decided he was just going to concede on this one. And nothing. I'll see you later. James was taking a break. A real break, not a working break where he was still trying to level something up, or was just relaxing in his office but still available to be talked to. He did have YouTube videos about deep sea life up on his second monitor, so he wasn't 100% taking a break, but it wasn't like he was listening to them that much if his lesson was to be believed. Lesson continues. Biology, 188 out of 200. Lesson continues. Basketball, 71 out of 1200. He should play more basketball. That one had been stagnating ever since he'd gotten busy. Maybe get some pickup games going with the new people at the lair. It was good exercise, which he needed more of anyway, and as Anesh had pointed out, it was surprisingly fun once you got past the learning stage. As with any skill, he supposed, once you were good enough you could start getting better, on purpose, and messing around a bit too, like his personal journey to learn how to cook without accidentally killing his friends or his pots. One worrying thing, which Sarah had confirmed for him when she'd stacked a second skill book from the school as well, was that the second lesson started out with a requirement twice what the first had. James had hoped he'd been misremembering things, something that he didn't worry about as much anymore. But no, the threshold rose, which was a real problem, and it suddenly made it clear how the Akashic Sewer was cheating its own magic. They knew Officium Mundi cheated, in a way. Well, they called it cheating, but it was really more of a real-world example of a balancing mechanic. So many skills were just kind of useless. There were a billion rewards, and not that many useful ones among them. The sewer, it seemed, was going a different direction. The rewards were powerful, but there was a soft cap on them. By your third or fourth lesson, you'd be needing to be taking 400-level college courses just to put a dent in the requirements. If he was lucky, it wasn't also making basketball harder. The reward for his basketball lesson was beyond powerful for someone like him, who very often was called on to shoot things. Sometimes people. Not missing was a real game changer. James shook himself out of his thoughts as he felt a tapping on his elbow. Huh? Oh, sorry, Rufus. He reached down and gave the little stapler a pet along his spine. It was still a little unclear how, exactly, Rufus arranged transport between their apartment and the lair, but he did it, and no one seemed like they were in a position to question him. It was relaxing to have a low-energy friend around while you were playing video games. Right now, James was playing RimWorld, while Rufus watched and mimed out his own commentary. So I'm thinking that we need a hospital zone next, James explained to his small friend. Rufus nodded enthusiastically, tapping a part of the screen. James quirked an eyebrow and scrolled over. The prison? No, that's not gonna... Rufus cut him off, waving his forelegs in a way that made it eerily clear what he was trying to get across. Open up, take out, sell... Are you trying to get me to harvest the prisoner's organs? James gave Rufus a disappointed frown, tilting his head down at the stapler. That's just rude. Rufus scrambled around the keyboard to point at other parts of the screen. Look, James, look, it seemed he was saying. You are low on silver, and there is a merchant caravan right there. Now is the perfect time to turn their delicious meat parts into cash. He danced the meaning of his very important message to his friend. James ran his teeth over his upper lip. Are you sure you've never played this game before? He asked Rufus. The stapler nodded, but then did a little side tilt that he did when he had an addendum and tapped at his forward eye, then back to the computer. Ah, watched some, huh? A solid nod in return. I feel like I should maybe be putting some parental controls on Twitch and YouTube, James grumbled. He considered putting it on the list of things to do that weren't dungeon-related, right underneath paying rent and getting a new car, though that second one might technically not count anymore, and he might not do it, since, as Anesh had touched on earlier, it was probably more environmentally friendly to just telepad everywhere. Also, Rufus seemed like he was more of an adult than half the people that were at the lair these days, so maybe he didn't need anybody restricting what he could watch. Almost everything in James's life had become dungeon-related these days. Half his friends were non-human now. He made a living using skills and resources from the dungeons. Even his casual hobbies and YouTube habits were tilted toward things that would get him his upgrades. And since they'd successfully copied the potions JP had brought back, soon, not even exercise was going to be normal for him anymore. Not that he was complaining. Far from it. The video that he had been watching was talking about the blobfish, and it suddenly struck James, along with a point of his biology lesson, that he was sort of the reverse of that bizarre creature. The blobfish was a perfectly normal-looking fish, at its own depth, but haul one to the surface and the change in pressure basically liquefied its flesh. Hence the name. It turned into a blob. James was the other way around. He'd been born and raised in a world that was wrong for him, where magic wasn't real and adventure was replaced by going to college for a skill you didn't care about and then not using your degree in that skill for a job that you anti-cared about. Stepping through the doors into Officium Mundi had been him settling into his proper depth. It was really, really hard to be mad at research for turning his car into a modern art sculpture when he could teleport everywhere. It was less hard, but still difficult, to be grumpy about the aches and pains in his body when almost every one of them was a reminder of an exciting moment. It was a challenge to empathize with Karen about their finances when they had a literal gold mine underneath the building in one of the basements. He should tell Karen about the gold mine. Even now, trying his best to relax, to decompress from spending endless hours dealing with people, doing work, running errands, and being a responsible leader and mild emergent folk hero, he was still thinking about the next delve, about the next step forward, about the next magic item or weird phenomenon or new friend. Not that it wasn't fun to interpret his stapler buddy's charade-style encouragement to do space crimes in the video game they were sharing. It was fun. In fact, life got a lot more relaxed in general the instant all his material needs were solved after one good day in the dungeon. He was going to take the dog for a walk in a little bit, and the fresh air was going to smell extra nice, without the lingering specter of the threat of homelessness on it. It wasn't really the same as something magic. Not really. Maybe Momo was right. Maybe he should take up becoming a totemic mage as a bonus hobby.